All right, man, peace. So as I'm sure most of you brothers are fully aware by now, the new black wokey-woke messiah, Colin Kaepernick, has decided that he's going to settle with the NFL behind closed doors, and it's truly what's best for both parties. I'll be expounding on that over the course of this video, but I'm sure that there are many brothers out there who think that I'm going to say, I told you so, or things of that nature. That's not really what my channel is about. Every once in a while, I have to accentuate to certain brothers the reason why I say certain things so that they can understand what's going on around them. But as I tell cats all the time, I don't do hot take videos. I don't do immediate reaction videos for the most part. Number one, because I don't have the time to jump and do immediate reaction videos. But number two, I make videos once again so that brothers understand how to think and how to understand what is occurring, why it's occurring, and how they're being manipulated, because most of these events are geared towards making sure that they can structure the so-called black man's thinking process in a certain way so that he can be happy to be at the bottom, and his only form of rebellion is to complain and not think like a king. Most cats out here do not think like kings, especially most of the internet revolutionary, so-called social justice warrior, black wokey woke cats. They don't think like kings. And thinking like a king has nothing to do with how much money you have, or how big your house is, or how nice your car is, or how fat your woman's ass is. It has nothing to do with that. It's simply about being able to discern what's going on around you. That's all it's about. It's not that deep, but I guess if you're not someone whose brain is acclimated or accustomed to thinking on a three-dimensional level, it is pretty deep. But just getting back to the point here with Mr. Colin Kaepernick, he's a pawn. He's always been a pawn, and he's still a useful pawn. And what factions like the NFL have come to understand, much like the U.S. government back in the early 1970s with Muhammad Ali, and by no means am I trying to synchronize Colin Kaepernick with Muhammad Ali, but when it comes to the understanding on what's most important and how to put out fires, both the U.S. government and the NFL came to understand better an athlete than a fake martyr or a fake image. Do I believe that Colin Kaepernick will end up back in the NFL? Yes, I do. I think that it will be with the Carolina Panthers. I believe that their owner, Tepper, was placed there for the sole reason of acting as a conduit for Colin Kaepernick once this whole situation finally came to a head. Most of these events regarding the Colin Kaepernick narrative that have transpired are clearly ritualistic in nature, are very clearly coordinated in nature. I've traced them pretty much step by step over the course of this whole storyline, whether it's Nate Boyer, the so-called long snapper from the Green Berets, who was the first initiator of the Colin Kaepernick kneeling aspect of his quote-unquote movement, or his so-called girlfriend, Ness Nitty, who's also been acting as an MK handler for him. She does all the talking. He does none of the talking. Why is it that he trusts her so much to dispense his message, if he even has a message? The answer is that he does not have a message. He's only a pawn. He's a puppet. He's a monarch athlete. And his woman, Ness Nitty, is his handler. She's the one who has his keys and understands his triggers. Right now, they're ready to move into the next phase. The real intent and purpose of the whole Colin Kaepernick mess was to try to engineer the NFL into becoming a quote-unquote woke league like the NBA. And to a degree, they've succeeded. To a degree, they failed, but to a degree, they've succeeded. Not to the extent that they wanted to succeed, but now what do we see in the NFL? As I've mentioned in other videos, now we see homosexual cheerleaders. Now we see male cheerleaders. Now we see females on the sideline with towels over their shoulder and whistles in their mouths, trying to act as if somebody should care that they're on the field or pay attention to them. This is what this was all about. Colin Kaepernick is a Marxist. He works for Marxists, that being the so-called Black Lesbians Matter movement, as well as their benefactor, Soros, and many other factions that are behind this whole Colin Kaepernick production. Nike Incorporated, so on and so forth, which is a Saturnian organization, Nike Incorporated. So do I believe that Colin Kaepernick, quote unquote, sold out his movement? No, I do not, because he never had a movement to begin with. You can only sell somebody out if you bought in the first place. He never bought in the first place. He's not a leader. He's an actor playing a role. He has to continue that act. That's all he is. But anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
A lot of things that are going on that are unjust, people aren't being held accountable for, and that's something that needs to change. This country stands for freedom, liberty, justice for all, and it's not happening for all right now. I'm seeing things happen to people that don't have a voice.
Brothers, let me say this very quickly, because this is a very common refrain amongst victimization pimps. people who try to push victimization, they'll claim that so-called black people don't have a voice. That's a damn lie. In 2019, everybody has a voice. It's called social media. There was a time period where we couldn't get out our own narratives, our own statements. We had to leave it up to newspapers and journalists to tell the story or recount what actually occurred. That no longer is the case. The same way that you can use Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat to try to garner attention for yourself, you can also use those platforms to speak what you understand reality to be, or to put forth or propagate your perspective. This notion that we're voiceless is nonsense. Nothing can be further from the truth. That's another attempt to try to get the so-called black man to believe that he has no power.
Former 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick and current Panthers safety Eric Reed reached a settlement with the NFL concerning their collusion grievances against the league. Due to a confidentiality agreement, there will be no further comment by any of the parties involved.
Of course, because it's really to both parties' advantage that none of the particularities or the wrongdoings of either party are brought into the public view. In the same way, people are saying, well, this means that the NFL lost because they didn't want Kaepernick to expose their shenanigans. Well, let me tell you something. I promise you that the NFL has a lot of dirt on Colin Kaepernick. And they came to him and they let him know, look, we can keep this going, or we can do what's best for both of us. Since you've left the NFL, our ratings have gone back up. We don't want it to go back down again, going back and forth with you all next season. It's almost like a divorce. Like you have some men who divorce their wives and they have to fight tooth and nail, tooth and claw to make sure that they hold on to whatever they have because they don't have much. Then you have a Michael Jordan who divorced his wife Juanita and gave her $500 million. He said, have a nice day, just go. You know why he did that? Because he has so much money, he had more than enough to spare. The fact that he gave her that much money did not mean that he lost his divorce case. All it means was that he was good with moving on into the future. Do I believe that Colin Kaepernick had information on the NFL that could have put them in a precarious position or would have exposed the quote-unquote dark underbelly of the NFL? No, I do not. Because there have been so many players who've been victimized by the NFL who could tell their stories about whatever nefarious modes or methods the NFL used against them. Nobody really cares. Everybody knows that the NFL is a seedy business. It's really like the modern day gladiatorial circuit. That's all it is. And you have to accept that. You are an expendable asset. You're one of 53 men on a roster. It's the most popular pastime. It's the most popular form of entertainment in the country, to the point where the NFL is followed overseas. You have people in Europe who follow the NFL, even though there are no NFL teams overseas. So it shows you how popular it is. Point being is this. The same way that I'm sure that Kaepernick may have been able to prove through an email that one GM from a certain team spoke to another GM and said that I'm not signing Kaepernick, are you? And maybe the other GM said, no, I'm not signing him. He's more trouble than he's worth. And they could use that to prove collusion. I'm also sure that the NFL, through their investigative means and detectives that they've hired, have been able to dig up some dirt on Kaepernick. Kaepernick has a lot of dirt on him as well. For those of us who remember him before he became woke, his name was in the news a lot, especially having to do with females.
Max, how do you think Colin Kaepernick looks today? Big picture, and you have to look hard. At this moment, Colin Kaepernick looks good.
No, he does not look good. He looks like someone who did what was expedient for him. And the NFL did what was expedient for them. It was a good or is a good business arrangement for both parties involved.
And the reason for that is, yes, it became a collusion case, but that's not how all this started. It started with his conscientious objection.
No, sir. It did not start with a conscientious objection. It started with Colin Kaepernick losing his starting position as the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. That's how it started. I promise you, if he was still starting, he would not be taking the so-called stand by kneeling that he took.
To participating in a voluntary ceremony. Voluntary ceremony. He did it quietly. The media noticed, made a big deal out of it.
Of course the media noticed because they were prompted to notice. Once again, you've had other players who have sat out the national anthem for years. The media never cared. Why did they all of a sudden care about Kaepernick unless they were prompted to care by some other entity, some other force? some other platform or what have you, who contacted them and told them, look at Colin Kaepernick. Why is that? Because Kaepernick was prompted to do so. Then they sent in their cleanup guy, their MK handler, Nate Boyer, who took Kaepernick aside, probably said something to him to access a certain altar in his subconscious and let him know, this is how you will be going about what we need you to do. And that's how that happened. Once again, look up this guy, Nate Boyer. He comes out of nowhere and gets a position at the University of Texas as a long snapper. And I think he was something like 26 to 27 years old. Out of the Green Berets. He was stationed overseas in Africa. All of a sudden, they bring him back to America. And if I remember correctly, the athletic director for the University of Texas was a former high-level official in the U.S. military. They placed Nate Boyer on the University of Texas team. He goes and gets a position with the Seattle Seahawks with Pete Carroll, and then somehow ends up contacting Colin Kaepernick and being the guiding light in determining how Kaepernick is going to protest. Very interesting. And then Kaepernick's so-called girlfriend, Ness Nitty, comes out of nowhere, or really comes through the Coven, through the MK farm known as MTV, where I believe she was one of the guest stars on that show, Guy Code, where she would spill the beans on how big of a hoe she was. All of a sudden, she's one of the biggest VJs in America, hosting at a hip-hop radio station here in New York, and also a guest speaker at the UN. Ain't that some shit?
Donald Trump noticed, turned it into a political, pardon the expression, football, and off we were to the races, right now, so to speak. Now, it became this enormous issue, but Kaepernick was not protesting that the league needs to open its books and show, and get into all its dirty secrets and everything. That wasn't what this was about originally.
So then the protest should have been off the field. It should not have been on the field if he did not want to conflate what he claimed he was protesting about and the NFL.
This was about, ultimately, when it became an issue, Kaepernick raising awareness for issues of social injustice, really, particularly.
Everyone in America is fully aware of quote-unquote social injustice. The people who care will do something. The people who don't won't. It's up to so-called black people. It's up to us to decide what we want out of life and what we want as a quote-unquote community. And there are a lot of problems that we have. So-called police brutality is a problem. Police harassment is a problem, but it's about 15th to maybe even as low as 20th on the list. There are many major problems that we have in the so-called black community. Harassment by the police is pretty far down on that ladder.
The way police interact with communities of color. Was awareness raised? Obviously. Were resources raised and directed in that and directed there? The answer is yes, they were. Now, ultimately, if Kaepernick gets a job in the league and
I believe that he will. I believe that the owner of the Carolina Panthers is going to try to find a way to bring him onto the squad. And that's why he's kind of sort of been trying to hint to Cam Newton that he should take the year off, because they want to bring in Kaepernick and let him try to be the starter on the team and see if he can be more effective than Cam Newton. And then after the next season, if Kaepernick is better than Cam Newton, then the NFL will have another wokety-woke storyline that they can propagate. Once again, that's what they want to do with the NFL. They want to turn it into another version of the NBA. The NBA is filled with narratives and storylines and who likes who and who does not like who. In the NFL, they don't really have that. So they're trying to bring that aspect into the NFL because they want to take the masculine aspect away from the NFL and make it more super liberal.
Kneels during the anthem, the optics will be clear to everyone that Kaepernick won. If he doesn't get a job in the league, or he does and stands for the anthem, there will be those who say, no, the league won. And I understand where people would say if he doesn't get a job, the league has made its point. You can stand up and do what you think you can do. But the bottom line is, you're going to be made an example of.
No, I believe that the real litmus test for Kaepernick and whether he quote-unquote won or the league won is that, number one, he's going to have to get a job. And number two is that for him to be considered the winner, number one, he's going to have to get a starting quarterback job in the NFL. And number two, he's going to have to be able to continue to kneel. If he can continue to kneel and have gotten a settlement from the NFL and his starting job back, then he will be considered the quote-unquote winner. If he gets a job in the NFL again, even if he gets a job in the NFL again, and he stands for the national anthem, He's going to be viewed by his wokey woke fan base as a sellout.
Maybe, guys, Kurt Flood never got paid, really. But you know what the bottom line is? The ceremony is now truly optional. It is not mandatory. And there are...
Well, in the NBA, it's mandatory. Are you going to say something about that? But I guess that you're not, because we know the NBA is super liberal and wokey woke, and their commissioner is a pansexual, allegedly pansexual Caucasian Jew, your homeboy Adam Silver. So you're not going to go at him too hard, even though their code of conduct concerning the national anthem is far more stringent than the NFL's. But they leave the NBA alone for whatever reason.
There are those who have opted out of it. So he has not only raised awareness, he's changed the way the league does business, and even if he doesn't benefit directly, which apparently he has because he ostensibly got paid for this, he has made a difference in precisely the way he intended in the first place.
No, not quite. Colin Kaepernick wanted to make a change, allegedly, according to him, in how the police treated people. He didn't want to make a change in how NFL players conducted themselves during the national anthem. That's nonsense. As a matter of fact, that's diametrically opposed to what he said, because he exclaimed that his protest had nothing to do with, or little to do with, the national anthem in and of itself, and that he was protesting the conduct of the police in America, and that the national anthem was symbolic of the hypocrisy of America. So that was the correlation that he made between the anthem and the protocols of America that he claimed to be so much against. So if the only thing that he got solved was that players now don't have to stand for the national anthem, he got nothing solved at all. That's all.
So you have to look hard, but big picture is he won.
If you have to look hard, then it's not a big picture, it's a little picture.
Well, he might have won in the big picture, Max Kellerman. I don't know that yet. I don't see that. And
thank you, sir.
And to answer the question directly, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think he looks very good, and I don't think the people who have supported and tried to martyr him look very, very good.
Well, that's a rather explosive assertion, Stephen A. Smith. Let me say this first off. In my view, Colin Kaepernick never looked good. He always looked pathetic. He always looked like, to be quite frank with you, and many people might not like this, he always looked like a very bitter and angry mulatto who was trying to find a home. He looked like somebody who was trying to find acceptance in a certain community. And we also see this with this clown, Jussie Smollett. They always go extra to try to prove their quote-unquote blackness. And that's why I stated in previous videos, if you're so-called mixed, you can't be a leader for so-called black people. You just can't, because you're mixed up and you're confused. You have to fall back. If you want to fall in line, whatever side you pick is whatever side you pick, but you can't be a leader. Simple as that. You don't have to like it. It is what it is.
Let me be very, very clear about that. Having said all of that, as a black man, his willingness to bring attention to issues that have plagued our community, I'm incredibly grateful to him for that, which is why I have supported him. I also believe that he has been blackballed. I don't care what anybody says.
I'm not quite sure what that means, though, when you say that somebody's been blackballed. I promise you that if you own a business and you have an employee who is superlative at what he does or what she does, if an hour before her shift, he spends all of their time outside of your establishment protesting some cause, and is stopping customers from coming into your establishment, you're going to let them go if they stop doing what they're doing because they're costing you money. That's what the issue is about with Colin Kaepernick, and I have no idea why people try to act like they don't understand why the NFL does not want him in their league. To me, collusion is, we don't want you in our league because you're black, or you're a homosexual, or you're this, or you're that. That's collusion. When you're hurting their bottom line, that's not really collusion. That's a cost-effective measure.
I definitely think that there is credence to that argument. But I'm going to tell you exactly why I don't think that he looks good. I don't know whether it was the Washington Post or where it was that I read this article, Max and Will. But there was a statement in there. There's a line in there. And it said, whether it was Washington Post, New York Times, I forget where it was. It says, justice and liberty dies in the dark. Well, here's where the problem lies. What did you win, Colin Kaepernick?
Not a damn thing. Because he's not a winner. He never won in the NFL. So how is he going to win on a subject that he really has no knowledge of? And I'm sure that many of his pro-blackity black, wokety woke following is going to get upset with that. But he didn't win anything. All he did was stir up a lot of our people who are constantly looking to maintain this back and forth with the so-called Caucasian. And I say this incessantly. You know why people love to go back and forth with the white man? because they're hoping that one day the white man will look at them and look deep into their eyes, and one tear will drip down his cheek and he'll say, "I'm so sorry, little Negro. I love you so much. Can I get a hug?" And all you pro-blackity black, wokety woke niggas out there who talk all that shit on the internet about boycotts and protests, you're going to run into his arms. And it's going to happen in slow motion. All right? If the white man ever turned to you and said, "I'm so sorry for how I treated you," you niggas are running to his damn arms so fast, you won't even know what the hell happened to you. You probably trip over your own damn feet. Okay? So that's why I say, once again, it's not collusion that they wanted to keep Colin Kaepernick out of the NFL. He was costing them ratings. Everybody knew that. Now, if you happen to find emails where they said, "You know what, we want to keep so-and-so out of the NFL because they're Hispanic, or because they're black, or because they're homosexual," and they're not wearing that on their sleeve to the point where it's detrimental to the NFL, where it's hurting the NFL on a league-wide basis, right? Like the whole Michael Sam thing. It's very obvious they kicked him out of the NFL because he was wearing his homosexuality on his sleeve. Because there are many homosexuals in the NFL. Don't get it twisted, and the NBA. But they kicked him out because ESPN was trying to work in tandem with college football to use the NFL as a jumping off point to push out of the closet homosexuals in professional sports. And it didn't work because Michael Sam, number one, couldn't play. Number two, the players around him were uncomfortable. Number three, I promise you, the viewership would have been severely hurt because the viewership of the NFL is mostly comprised of Caucasian conservatives from middle America. And that's who they have to make sure that they gear many of their messages towards. The NBA is more liberal, but notice, even in the NBA, there's yet to be an out-of-the-closet homosexual in the NBA. Point being is this: you cannot allow anybody's lifestyle to hurt your bottom line. And Colin Kaepernick and many of, his little stunts were starting to hurt their bottom line. Certain people on television tried to deny it, like Max Kellerman, but the proof is in the pudding. Colin Kaepernick has been out of the NFL now for about a year and a half. This past season, the ratings shot back up. So, it is what it is. Do I believe that they're going to find a way to get him back into the league? Yes, but he's going to have to work certain things out with Tepper and with the NFL. Because if he comes back in kneeling, the answer is going to be no. So it's going to be up to him. Is he going to be willing to alienate his wokety woke fan base? Because if he comes back to the Panthers and he's not kneeling, he's going to lose a lot of the equity that he built up with them. Unless he just doesn't care anymore. He might not care after a while. Who knows?